Welcome to Cursed TV, where shadows whisper and the night comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Turn off the lights, relax, and let the stories begin. Story 1. I took a job at a haunted motel. The guests are not human. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the ad. Night clerk wanted. No experience necessary. High pay. Cash only. That last part stood out. Nobody pays in cash anymore, and definitely not at the rate they were offering, 3 times what a normal graveyard shift job would pay. But I was desperate. Rent was overdue, my car was on the verge of breaking down, and my fridge was as empty as my bank account. The motel sat on the outskirts of town, a crumbling relic from the 70s, barely visible from the highway. The neon sign flickered erratically, buzzing like a dying insect. Moonlight Motel, it read, though half the letters were burnt out. Moonlight Motel. It looked abandoned, but as I pulled into the cracked parking lot, I saw a single light glowing from the office window. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of mildew and something else, something metallic, like rust or blood. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't slept in years. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the flickering fluorescent lights, and his eyes were sunken, shadowed by deep circles. "You here for the job?" His voice was flat, emotionless. I hesitated before nodding. He pushed a set of keys across the desk. "You start tonight." "No interview?" I asked. "Not necessary." I should have walked out right then. But the weight of my empty wallet kept me rooted to the spot. I swallowed my unease. "Any rules?" The man's gaze darkened. His lips barely moved as he spoke. "Never question the guests." A chill crawled up my spine. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told me I wouldn't like the answer. Instead, I nodded, took the keys, and stepped behind the counter. The man stood up and grabbed his coat. "I'll be back at dawn. Don't leave the office. Don't talk too much. And whatever you see on the cameras, ignore it." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in the dim, humming silence of the Moonlight Motel. And that was the beginning of the longest night of my life. At first, the shift was quiet. Too quiet. The only sound was the steady ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. I busied myself organizing the scattered papers on the desk, trying to ignore the peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of something rotten wafting from the vents. The guest log sat open in front of me. I flipped through the pages. Something was off. The names were strange. Some were illegible, written in symbols I didn't recognize. Others were just initials, or single words like Mr. White or Mother. And then there were the dates. The most recent check-in was 3 days ago. No checkouts. Before that? A week. 2 weeks. A month. Pages and pages of guests arriving, but never leaving. A shiver crept up my spine. The bell above the office door jingled, and I nearly jumped out of my chair. A man stood in the doorway. At least, I thought it was a man. His face was wrong. Something about the way the shadows fell across it made it seem like his features were shifting, like his mouth and nose weren't quite where they should be. His suit was too clean, too crisp, like it had just been ironed moments before. He didn't blink. "I need a room," he said. His voice didn't match his lips. There was a lag, like a badly dubbed movie. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice. "Sure. How many nights?" He tilted his head slightly. "Just the one." A lie. I knew that now. I handed him a key, trying not to let my fingers touch his as he took it. His skin was ice cold. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the hallway. His footsteps were off. Too slow, too deliberate. Like he was mimicking how a person should walk, but not quite getting it right. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the motel's dimly lit corridor. I should have ignored the cameras, like the manager said. But I didn't. I turned to the monitor, watching the grainy black and white feed of the hallway outside room 6, where the man had just gone. He stood in front of the door, motionless. Seconds passed. Then minutes. He didn't move. Then, all at once, the screen flickered with static. And when the image returned, the man was staring directly into the camera. His face was too close, stretched unnaturally across the screen, as if he knew I was watching. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. Not a human smile. It was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, his teeth long and needle-like, gleaming in the flickering light. I slammed the monitor off. I didn't sleep at all that night. And when dawn came, the man was gone. But the key to room 6 was still on the desk. Untouched. The second night felt heavier. I hadn't slept after what I saw on the cameras. Even in daylight, the motel felt wrong. The air was stale, too still, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. When I arrived for my shift, the manager barely acknowledged me. He sat in the office for a few minutes, staring at the wall, before muttering, "You stayed. Good." Then he left, leaving me alone with whatever the hell was lurking in this place. The night started slow. I spent the first few hours flipping through the old guest logs, trying to make sense of the bizarre entries. I found names that had been repeated over and over across different years, decades even. Mr. White. Mother. H. Carter. H. Carter. H. Carter. The same names. The same rooms. But always new dates. The wind howled outside. The walls groaned like they were breathing. Then, around 2 a.m., the noise started. A faint scratching, coming from inside the vents. At first, I tried to ignore it. Rats, I told myself. Or maybe just the old pipes settling. But the sound grew louder. More deliberate. It wasn't just random scurrying, it was pacing. A slow, dragging movement, like something was crawling just beneath the surface. I turned up the tiny radio on the desk, trying to drown it out. That's when the phone rang. The motel phone. The one that had been silent all night. I picked it up, hesitant. Front desk. Static. Then, a voice, faint, whispering. "Help me." My breath caught in my throat. "Who is this?" Silence. And then, thump. The sound came from inside the vent, just above my head. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Dust trickled from the metal grates. Whatever was inside was right there, pressing against the thin barrier. The metal creaked, bending outward slightly, as if something was pushing from the other side. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and aimed it at the vent. "Who's in there?" No answer. Just breathing. Shallow, ragged breathing. Then, slowly, something moved. A shadow shifted behind the grate. A long, pale hand with fingers too many and too thin slipped through one of the gaps. It twitched, stretching unnaturally, grasping at the air. I staggered back. What the hell? Bang! The vent dented outward, as if whatever was inside had thrown itself against it. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I grabbed the office door handle, ready to run. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. I stood there, frozen, barely breathing. Minutes passed. The air was thick, oppressive. The vent remained still. And then, the phone rang again. I picked it up with a shaking hand. Static. And then, the voice, closer this time. Don't look at them. Click. The line went dead. I nearly quit that night. But when dawn came, the manager returned as if nothing had happened. He didn't ask why my hands were shaking. Didn't ask why the vent was dented, or why I had unplugged the security cameras. He just dropped an envelope of cash on the desk and said, "See you tonight." And like an idiot, I showed up again. The third night felt worse. The motel seemed darker, the air heavier. The lights flickered more than usual. The neon sign outside buzzed like a dying fly, barely illuminating the lot. And the guests, they were watching me. They didn't talk, not really. They'd come in, ask for a room in voices that barely sounded human, and disappear into the hall. I avoided eye contact, keeping my head down, pretending not to notice the way their faces shifted when they moved. Then, around midnight, she arrived. A woman. She was different from the others. She looked normal. Her face didn't change when I blinked. Her movements were smooth, natural. She had deep, sunken eyes, and her dark hair hung in wet strands over her face, like she had just stepped out of a storm. She leaned in close when she spoke. "Please. I need a room." Her voice was hoarse, desperate. I hesitated. "How many nights?" Her hand clamped over mine. Ice cold. "Just one." The same lie they all told. I gave her the key to room 9. She didn't thank me. Didn't even look at it. She just snatched it from my hand and hurried down the hallway, glancing over her shoulder as if something were following her. I watched her on the cameras. Unlike the others, she didn't just stand in front of her door. She locked it. Bolted it. Pushed the dresser in front of it. Then she sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes glued to the door. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to check on her. Maybe because she seemed scared. Maybe because she seemed real. I grabbed the master key and made my way down the hall. The motel felt suffocating, like the walls were pressing in. Every door I passed felt wrong, like something was breathing on the other side. When I reached room 9, I knocked softly. "Ma'am? Everything okay?" Silence. Then, a whisper. "They know I'm here." My stomach twisted. "Who?" She didn't answer. But suddenly, her eyes snapped to something behind me. I turned. And for the first time, I saw one of them. One of the guests. Standing at the end of the hall. Too tall. Too thin. A silhouette darker than the shadows around it. Its head was tilted too far, its face blank, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, featureless skin stretched over bone. It twitched, taking a jerky step forward. The lights flickered. And then, another one appeared. And another. Stepping out of the rooms. Emerging from the darkness. Surrounding me. The woman in room 9 grabbed my wrist, yanking me inside just as the lights went out. I didn't fight her. I didn't question it. Because for the first time since I started this job, I knew one thing for certain. I was never supposed to leave this motel. The woman's grip was like ice, her nails digging into my skin as she slammed the door shut. "Turn off the light," she hissed. I barely had time to react before she reached past me and twisted the lamp switch. The room plunged into darkness. My pulse pounded in my ears as we stood there, barely breathing. Then, the footsteps started. Slow. Uneven. Right outside the door. I wanted to move, to hide, to do something, but the woman squeezed my wrist tighter, her silent warning clear, "Don't." The floorboards creaked. Something was standing outside. The doorknob twitched. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. The darkness pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I could hear it breathing. Or maybe that was the woman. Or maybe it was something else. Then, something slid under the door. A shadow. Long, stretching across the carpet like fingers, curling toward my feet. I felt a cold, unnatural pull, like it was trying to drag me closer. My breath hitched as I took a tiny step back, but the second I moved, the shadow snapped toward me. The woman clamped a hand over my mouth before I could scream. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't move. Don't speak. It can't see you unless you let it." The shadow twitched. Hesitated. And then it retracted. The footsteps retreated, slow and deliberate. The door creaked as something leaned against it, its weight pressing against the wood. I could feel it there. Waiting. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Then, nothing. It was gone. The woman finally let go of me, and I sucked in a ragged breath. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. She didn't answer at first. She just walked to the window and peeled back the curtain an inch, peering outside. Then she whispered two words that made my stomach drop. "You saw them." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to respond. She turned to face me, her sunken eyes full of something like pity. "You shouldn't have come to this place." "I didn't have a choice," I muttered. Her expression darkened. "None of us did." Something about the way she said that made my skin crawl. I took a shaky breath. "What are they?" The woman hesitated. "They don't have a name. Not one we can say." I shook my head. "That doesn't make any sense." She ignored me, stepping closer. "How long have you been working here?" 3 nights, I said. Her face twisted with something like grief. "That's too long." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the door. "Did you notice? The ones who check in." I nodded slowly. "They don't leave. Neither do the employees." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I shook my head. "No. The manager, he leaves every morning." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Does he?" The room felt colder. A horrible thought crept into my mind. The manager was always gone when I arrived, always back before dawn. I thought about the security cameras. The flickering static. The way some guests just stood in front of their doors, unmoving, staring at nothing. The way the motel seemed bigger at night, the hallways stretching longer than they should. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, pressing it into my hand. A room key. But not just any key. It was old, rusted, the number worn away. The metal was ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. "What is this?" I asked. Her voice was hollow. "The key to the real exit." My blood ran cold. "There is no front door," she whispered. "Not really. That thing you walk through every night. It just brings you back in." I wanted to deny it. To argue. But deep down, I felt the truth in her words. I gripped the key tighter. And then the hallway light flickered. The air shifted. The woman went pale. "They know," she whispered. "They know I told you." A deep, rattling click echoed from the hallway. Like every door was unlocking. And then the motel came alive. The walls groaned, the ceiling trembled. Shadows leaked from under the door. The air was thick with the sound of something moving, countless bodies shifting, twitching, crawling. The woman grabbed my arm. "Run." The door burst open. And I saw all of them. Not just the guests. Not just the manager. Something else. Something that had been waiting for me since the moment I arrived. And then The lights went out. The lights died. Total darkness swallowed the room, thick and suffocating, pressing against my skin like damp earth. I couldn't see my own hands, couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut. But I felt them. The guests. Standing in the doorway. Waiting. A sound crawled through the dark, bones popping, joints twisting, something wet and wrong shifting closer. Then. A whisper, right next to my ear. "Where do you think you're going?" Cold breath slid across my neck. I bolted. The woman grabbed my wrist, yanking me forward as we ran. I couldn't see, but she seemed to know where to go. My feet pounded against the carpet, the motel warping around us, hallways stretching, doors multiplying, the air thick with the scent of rot and something metallic, like blood. The sounds behind us grew louder. Faster. The guests were following, moving with that horrible, jerky twitching like broken marionettes, their two long limbs scraping against the walls. "Where are we going?" I gasped. "The stairs," she whispered. We turned a corner, and suddenly, there they were. The stairs to the second floor. Except. There was no second floor. I stopped short. What the hell? I had seen this motel from the outside. It was one story. No stairs. No upper level. But here they were. A long, spiraling staircase, disappearing into the dark above us. "Come on," she hissed, pulling me up the steps. I didn't fight her. As we climbed, the motel shifted around us. The walls grew taller, the air colder. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that moved on their own. A voice slithered through the dark. "You don't belong here." It was everywhere. Behind us. Above us. Inside my own head. Then. A hand shot out from between the steps. Thin. Gray. Fingers too long, clawing at my ankle. I kicked, hard. The thing screeched, a high, warbling sound like a skipping record. The woman yanked me up the last few steps, and suddenly. We weren't in the motel anymore. We were somewhere else. The air changed the second we stepped off the stairs. It was wrong. Heavy. We stood in a narrow hallway lined with doors. Hundreds of them. More than the motel could possibly hold. They stretched endlessly in both directions, each door identical, wooden, numbered in brass. "This isn't real," I whispered. The woman ignored me, marching forward with quick, purposeful steps. "Stay close. Don't touch the doors." I followed, my heart hammering. The hallway was dead silent except for our footsteps, but I could feel something behind the doors. Watching. Listening. Then, as we passed room 209. Knuckles rapped against the wood. I froze. The woman grabbed my arm, yanking me forward. "Don't stop." Another door knocked. Then another. The sound spread like a wave, growing faster, more frantic, dozens, no, hundreds, of fists hammering against the wood. Bang 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 bang. The hallway shook. The doors rattled in their frames. And then. One swung open. A long, pale arm shot out, fingers grasping, nails splintering as they dug into the floor. The rest of it followed, a thing, crawling out on too many limbs, its head lolling, mouth yawning open in a soundless scream. We ran. The hallway stretched, growing longer, the doors warping and pulsing like breathing flesh. The lights flickered wildly, casting grotesque, shifting shadows that didn't match our movements. Something was chasing us. I didn't dare look back. Then. The woman stopped. I skidded to a halt beside her. "What the hell are you doing?" "Keep moving." She didn't respond. She was staring at a door. Different from the others. Black. No number. No handle. The exit, she breathed. I didn't ask questions. I reached for the key she had given me earlier, shoved it into the lock, and twisted. The door screamed. Not a creak. Not a groan. A full, shrieking wail, as if the wood itself was alive. The air turned ice-cold. The motel shuddered, the hallway collapsing inward. And then, the door swung open. And on the other side, there was nothing. A black void, stretching endlessly. Cold air pulled at me, dragging me toward it like a gaping mouth ready to swallow me whole. The woman grabbed my wrist. This is the only way out. I stared into the darkness. My stomach twisted with a primal, gut-wrenching fear. Something waited in that void. Something worse than the guests. The hallway behind us collapsed, doors crumbling into the walls, shadows surging forward like a living thing. We had seconds to decide. Stay in the motel, or step into the unknown. And then, the blackness reached for us. The darkness pulled. Not like gravity, not like wind, this was different. It felt alive, wrapping around my limbs, dragging me forward without touching me. The woman clutched my wrist. Jump, she hissed. My body refused. My mind screamed a no. Every instinct I had told me that stepping into that void meant never coming back. Behind us, the motel collapsed, walls warping, floors splitting open like something beneath it was trying to crawl out. The guests, if they were ever really guests, were moving toward us in unnatural, twitching jerks, their heads snapping side to side like broken puppets. And then, the manager appeared. Not walking. Not running. He was just there. Right in front of us. His eyes were completely black now, no whites, no pupils. His face shifted, like it was made of something liquid. You were doing so well, he said, voice smooth, empty. You almost made it. The shadows moved around him, curling at his feet like smoke. I gritted my teeth. What the hell is this place? The woman tightened her grip on my wrist. Don't listen to him. Jump. The manager tilted his head too far, the skin at his neck stretching like wax. Where do you think that door leads? He said, gesturing to the black void. Do you think it's an exit? A cold dread settled in my stomach. He smiled. Too wide. There's no leaving, kid. Not through there. Not through anywhere. I didn't want to believe him. But something deep inside me did. The woman pulled me hard toward the void. He's lying. If we stay, we become them. I turned back to the manager. His smile had disappeared. The guests surged forward. I had no choice. I jumped. And everything went black. Falling. Not fast. Not slow. Just endless. The darkness wasn't empty. It whispered. Not words, just sounds. Wet clicking, distant voices, laughter that wasn't laughter. I tried to scream. My mouth wouldn't open. The woman was falling beside me, her hair whipping around her face. Her eyes met mine, and I saw fear. Not the kind you get when you're scared of the dark. The kind you get when you realize you've made a mistake. Then, we stopped. Not like landing. There was no impact, no jolt, just, suddenly, we were somewhere else. I sucked in a sharp breath. My lungs burned. My body felt wrong, like I had been turned inside out and stitched back together. I blinked. Light. Dim, flickering. The glow of a neon sign. The buzzing was the first thing I recognized. Then, the hum of an old air conditioning unit. The distant sound of a TV playing something unintelligible. I was in a motel office. Not the same one. But almost the same one. The Moonlight Motel sign outside wasn't flickering anymore. It glowed a sickly red, the letters shifting slightly, like they were trying to spell something else. The woman sat beside me, breathing hard. No. No, 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 she stood up suddenly, gripping the counter. We were supposed to get out. I swallowed thickly. Maybe we did. She turned to look at me. Does this look like out to you? I didn't answer. Because outside, in the parking lot, there were cars. Not abandoned. Not rusted. Running. Idling. Full of people. People who looked normal. A man leaned against a truck, smoking a cigarette. A woman adjusted her mirror in a silver sedan. A couple dragged suitcases toward the front door. It looked like a real motel. Like any motel. Except for one thing. The manager was still behind the desk. Not the same one. Not exactly. But he looked right at me. And smiled. Like he knew me. Like he had been waiting. A sick realization curdled in my stomach. I turned to the woman. She was staring at the guest log on the counter. Her hands were shaking. I stepped closer. Looked over her shoulder. And there they were. Our names. Written neatly in black ink. Checked in. But never checked out. The woman stepped back. This isn't real. This isn't real. My head felt light. The air too thick. I turned back to the window, staring at the parking lot. And that's when I saw it. One of the guests. A woman, standing near the vending machines. Still. Too still. Not blinking. Not moving. And then. Her face shifted. Just for a second. Like something else was underneath it, wearing it. And I realized. None of these people were real. None of them had ever left. And neither would we. I couldn't breathe. The woman clutched my arms so tight it hurt, her nails digging into my skin. She was still staring at the guest log, her breath coming in shallow gasps. We never left. The words hit me like a gut punch. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say something logical, something rational. But I couldn't. Because I knew she was right. The parking lot. The guests. The manager. It was all too perfect. The motel looked normal. But I had already seen what was beneath the surface. And so had she. We have to go, I whispered. She nodded, snapping out of her daze. We turned toward the door. And he was standing there. The manager. Not behind the desk this time. Blocking the exit. His black eyes bore into me, and his smile stretched just a little too wide. Leaving so soon. His voice was calm, casual, as if we hadn't just fallen through a nightmare. The woman grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward the side door. I didn't hesitate. We ran. Through the hall. Past the guests, things in human skin, their faces flickering as they turned toward us, their eyes vacant, watching. We burst through the emergency exit and into the parking lot. The cars were gone. The people were gone. The world outside the motel was wrong. The road stretched forever, a perfect, unbroken black highway vanishing into an empty, starless sky. No moon. No streetlights. No sound. I turned in a slow circle, my breath turning to ice in my chest. We were alone. The woman grabbed my shoulders. There has to be a way out. I nodded because I had to believe it. But then. The neon sign flickered. I turned toward it, my stomach twisting. It no longer said Moonlight Motel. The letters shifted, warping, buzzing, rearranging themselves into something new. A single word. Stay. And then. The front doors swung open. And the guests began to step outside. Slow. jerky, twitching like broken dolls. Their heads twisted unnaturally, their smiles stretching too far. The manager walked out last, hands in his pockets. He looked at us with something close to amusement. "You can run," he said. "But you'll only come back." I swallowed hard. My skin crawled. "What do you mean?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew. His smile widened. "You've always been here." The world lurched. The motel blinked, flickering, stretching, glitching like a dying signal. The parking lot melted into the lobby, the sky folded into wallpaper, and suddenly, we were inside again. Standing at the front desk. The guest log open. 2 new names written inside. Mine. Hers. Checked in. Never checked out. My head spun. My stomach lurched. I reached for the door again. But it wasn't there anymore. Just hallways. Endless hallways stretching out where the exit should have been. The floor throbbed beneath my feet, the walls warped like breathing flesh. The woman shook her head violently. "No. No, no, this isn't real." But it was. The manager leaned against the counter, watching us with mild curiosity. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. "There's no out. No escape. No waking up." His black eyes glittered. "This place is a mouth. And it already swallowed you." I backed away. "That's bullshit. If we got in, we can get out." He chuckled. "You never got in." He tapped the guest log. "You've always been here." I felt sick. I turned to the woman. "We're leaving." She nodded quickly. "We're leaving." We took off down the hall, but the motel moved with us. The walls stretched. The lights flickered. The air grew thicker, like we were running through something alive. Doors opened on their own, revealing things that weren't human. Figures standing in the dark, their faces melting, their eyes watching. Then, a room door swung open in front of us. Room 9. Our room. The one we had never left. Inside, the TV was on. Playing static. The bed was made. And on the pillows were 2 perfect imprints. Like someone had been lying there just seconds ago. I froze. My stomach dropped. The woman's breath hitched. "No." She turned to me, her eyes wide and hollow. "We're still in the bed." The words barely left her lips before the walls collapsed inward. The motel shrieked, the floor split open, and I saw something beneath it all. Endless rooms. Endless hallways. A never-ending maze of twisting, shifting spaces. The truth hit me all at once. This wasn't a motel. It was a trap. A place that pulled people in. That made them forget. That kept them running forever, searching for a way out that never existed. The guests weren't people. They were the ones who stopped running. And now, we were becoming them. The last thing I heard was the manager's voice. Calm. Smooth. Final. Welcome home. Story 2. If you ever go to the Niagara Falls View Hotel, don't stay in room 5849. They'll tell you it's safe. They might say it's the only room available. Don't listen. Go to another hotel if you have to. But don't go in that room. My girlfriend and I decided to visit Niagara Falls as a Valentine's Day weekend away. I booked it all a few weeks in advance and we were both eagerly awaiting the trip as the days counted down towards the 17th, the weekend after Valentine's Day. When we got there, they told us they were overbooked and the person at the check-in desk appeared slightly anxious as she told us that we were being upgraded at no extra charge. You'll be staying in a suite with a view of the Canadian Falls, which is an upgrade over your previous room," she said, smiling but not with her eyes. "Enjoy your stay at the Falls View Hotel." She handed us our room keys and pointed us towards the elevator, telling us we would be staying in room 5849. I couldn't help but notice that her hand was shaking as she handed the keys to me. One elevator was broken and so there was a line for the remaining working ones. But we waited and eventually were brought up to our floor at lightning speed, stopping abruptly every 20 feet along the way to let people on and off. We entered our room and I immediately felt a chill run up my spine. I jerked my head around, trying to find the source of the feeling of eyes upon me. Of course, there was no one in the room but us. "Do you feel that?" my girlfriend Jennifer asked. She shivered and clutched herself. "I don't like this room. Can we get a different one?" Both of us reluctantly entered and I went over to the phone on the desk in the corner, hoping to reach the front desk. I called downstairs and made an excuse that the room was too cold, which it actually was suddenly, and was told they were completely booked, and there were no other rooms available. "I guess we'll have to make do," I said. "We're just gonna be sleeping here. Do you want to go over to the falls and check out the view for a bit?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Let's get out of here." Asterisk. We stayed out in the cold for longer than we should have, until our faces were numb from the February wind coming off the falls. We ventured up and down the pathway and held hands, looking at the misty water being lit up by high-powered multicolored lights. It was cold and windy but for a while we forgot about that unpleasant feeling we'd had in the hotel room. We went out for dinner at a restaurant where you could look out the window and see the falls, then wandered around visiting shops for a while before heading back to our room. The unpleasant feeling wasn't so strong this time as we entered, and I tried not to mention it, instead looking out the window and enjoying the view, which we hadn't done the first time we'd entered the room, too anxious to escape. After a while we both settled into bed. It was hard to fall asleep, but eventually I did. When I awoke, it was to the sound of splashing water. I felt freezing cold, as if I were in a giant refrigerator. As I exhaled, I could see my breath plume into the air in the light of the casino's fluorescence from outside. I turned my head to the left, looking into the bathroom which could be glimpsed from the bed. At first, my blurry eyes mistook what I saw, and I thought it was Jennifer having a late-night bath. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, and when I opened them I saw that Jennifer was in bed beside me, not in the tub. I looked back into the other room and blinked again, clearing my blurry vision. There was a shriveled old woman in the bath, grinning with a smile full of rotten brown teeth. Her eyes were missing and only dark cavities could be seen there. For a few seconds I couldn't do anything. I just laid there, frozen. The old woman continued staring at me with her dead-eyed gaze, her rotten smile growing wider, and I felt myself begin to shiver as the room grew even colder. I realized I wasn't doing anything and tried to open my mouth to scream, but found myself paralyzed. I couldn't move or speak. But then she began leaning forward, swinging her gray, shriveled, waterlogged leg over the side of the tub. And I finally managed to let out a piercing scream. One louder and shriller than ever before in my life. Jennifer woke up and was trying to comfort me and I realized my eyes were squeezed shut. When I opened them, the woman was gone. I tried to explain to her what had happened. Immediately she was rationalizing it all, telling me it was a dream. She even went into the bathroom and checked to make sure, like a parent checking the closet for monsters. She assured me that the bathtub was bone dry. It was just a nightmare, she said, coming back into the bedroom. Part of me was terrified that she had her back turned on that room, that the shriveled old woman would sneak up behind her and strangle her from behind. I pictured that wrinkled, water-bloated arm coming around her neck and that horrible smile peeking out from behind her as she snapped her neck. But none of that happened. It was still and quiet in the room, aside from the sound of my rapid breathing, eventually slowing down to a normal pace. "Are you gonna be alright?" Jennifer asked, looking concerned. It's amazing how quickly we can convince ourselves that these types of things were just a dream. If something supernatural has ever happened to you, maybe you can relate. Like an idiot, I told myself it didn't happen. That what Jennifer had told me was true, it was just a nightmare. Yeah, I'll be okay, I said, after a while. It was just a nightmare. It had to be. For a long time I didn't sleep. I was afraid to. I was worried that old woman would be there waiting for me in my dreams. I laid there in bed, insisting we leave a light on, for what felt like hours. But eventually I must have drifted off to sleep, because I was the one who woke up to a scream this time. And also to the sound of the bathroom door slamming shut. I saw her. Jennifer was screaming, hugging me tightly to herself. She's in the bathroom. That old woman is in the bathroom. I stood up and my feet immediately felt wet when they hit the carpeted floor. I looked down to see wet footprints leading up to the foot of our bed, and a huge pool of water there. As if someone had come from the bathtub and stood there for a while, watching us as we slept. For some reason this time I didn't feel scared. I felt angry. I felt like I needed to defend Jennifer from this thing which had been terrorizing us and harassing us, making us feel unwanted and unsafe in a room I had spent hundreds of dollars for. I stood up on shaky legs, forcing myself to take a step forward, and then another. "What are you doing?" Jennifer yelled. "She's in there." Taking a deep breath, ignoring my pounding heart and every ounce of my being telling me to run away, I pushed the bathroom door open and stepped inside. There was no one there. But the room was misty and humid. It felt stifling, as if someone had just taken a 3-hour, steaming hot shower in there. Or a long, warm bath. The mirror was fogged over, and as I stood there looking at it, words began to form. Letters being written as if by an invisible finger. "Get out of my room," it said, in large, block letters. I slowly backed out of the bathroom. It suddenly occurred to me that I didn't know what I was dealing with. This thing could reach into my chest and stop my heart for all I knew. It could be extremely dangerous. "Let's go," I said. "Let's get the hell out of here." We ran out of the room in our shorts and t-shirts, not even wearing shoes. The people at the front desk looked at us like we were crazy, until we told them which room we were staying in. "Oh my gosh," the clerk at the desk said, rapidly typing on the keyboard in front of them. "That room is never supposed to." After looking at the computer screen for several more moments, they called over to a manager. "Hey, Buck, can you come here for a minute?" The two of them spoke in hushed voices for a while, before the manager came over to talk to us. "Alex tells me you're having some issues with your room," he began. "We'll be happy to provide you with a free room, as a token of apology for your inconvenience. Due to our lack of capacity, we can transfer you to our sister hotel for the remainder of your stay. Again, our sincere apologies, and the rest of your accommodations this weekend will be entirely on us." I began to speak up, but Jennifer grabbed my hand and gripped it firmly. She just wanted to leave this hotel. And so did I. "We'll need someone to grab our things from the room," I said. "I'm not going back up there." He gulped in a very telling way. "I'll see what I can do." An hour later, a young, terrified-looking bellhop delivered us our luggage. Then we left the hotel thankfully behind. Asterisk. I did some research when I got home, trying to find out exactly what happened in that room, and why that ghost was so angry, so insistent on keeping others out of there. I wondered who that woman was, and why she was so tied to that room, and the solitude it afforded. What I discovered after some deep diving online, was that someone died in that hotel room. A woman who was staying with her boyfriend on a vacation, just like we were. But he left her after a bitter argument, telling her he was going to go sleep with someone else. Apparently she loved him more than anything, and was so depressed over him leaving that she wanted a way out. The woman went back to her hotel room and took a bath, falling asleep in the tub after consuming a lot of alcohol and sleeping pills. She hoped he would come back to find her there, but he never did. Instead, a hotel employee stumbled upon her body after checkout time, when she came to clean the room. Ever since that day, people who stay in the room say they feel cold chills up their spine. Some say they feel hands running through their hair in the dead of night, as they attempt to fall asleep. And others, especially couples like us, find wet footprints on the carpet, when no one has set foot inside the bathtub. Story 3. Right off the bat, I want to get this out there: I do not believe in ghosts, or did not, that was, until my experience last week. Now I'm not too sure. What changed my mind? My night at a creepy roadside motel. I guess by definition all roadside motels can be described as creepy. Nearby highways, dimly lit parking lots, shady characters hanging out of doorways smoking. And the one me and my girlfriend stayed in last week where I had this paranormal experience was no different. A place well and truly stuck in the 50s called The Lodge. We found it just off the I-95 in the middle of Maine. We were on our way to Canada to attend a wedding in the province of New Brunswick and were driving because 2 weeks earlier my girlfriend had had the great idea of taking the scenic route. Basically because she hates flying. Why not? I had thought at the time. What else could be more enjoyable than a nice summer drive up through Maine? It turned out that a lot of things could have been more enjoyable, for the scenic route came with a lot of rain and not much else. A storm coming off the Atlantic pounded us the moment we left Boston, the music in our car accompanied non-stop by the swishing of windscreen wipers. We had been due to stop at the night in Portland on the coast with a friend, but that morning he had called to say his mother in New York was sick and he would be spending the weekend with her. Never mind. Why don't we stop somewhere else for the night? And that is where the roadside motel comes in. It was just before sunset that we pulled into its parking lot. Over the noise of the storm I asked, "Is the place abandoned?" Which was not an unreasonable question since half the doors and windows in the U-shaped courtyard were boarded up. My girlfriend simply pointed to a small office, where a neon light flickered that read, "The Lodge." Just below the sign, through a dirty window, sat an old lady behind a desk, watching us. I got out into the rain. Flashes of lightning zigzagged across the black sky as I jogged between the little rivers forming on the broken tarmac. Between the rolling thunder, you could hear the drones of the passing vehicles on the nearby I-95. Upon my entrance into the office, room which smelled of a mix of cigarettes and mothballs, the old woman merely stared at me, her eyes hollow and lifeless. "Are you open?" I asked, water dripping from my coat onto the stained carpet. The old woman did not say anything, only continued to watch me with her hollow eyes. Then, like she had been considering my request, began to nod slowly. "Okay, how much is a room?" She rose from the chair, placed on the counter a set of keys, which had the number 66 attached as a tag. "Okay. Yes. At this point you turn around, get back in the car and hit the highway." It was that part in the horror movie where the lead role finds a staircase descending into darkness, and yourself, from the safety of the audience, are screaming, "Don't go down there, stupid." But what do they always do? They always go down. I suppose it wouldn't be such a great story if the character slams the door shut and leaves the killer waiting in the dark twiddling his thumbs, would it? But I digress. At the old woman sliding the keys forward, I got out $20 and waved it in the air like a white flag. $20 for the night. The old woman nodded and pointed at the keys. I glanced out of the window towards the car. Lightning momentarily illuminated my girlfriend in the steam-up car, nervously watching me. "Should we stay here?" I turned back round to the woman and grabbed the keys. "Thanks," I muttered, and headed back out into the rain. Upon entering the car, I dangled the keys in front of my girlfriend. "Friendly woman," I said cheerily. Though she said business was quiet tonight. "Yeah, just a bit," my girlfriend replied, looking round the dark courtyard. "It's kind of creepy here. Why don't we head straight on to Canada tonight?" "Nah, should be fine." I shifted the car in gear and trundled it over to near room 66. One night won't hurt us. Famous last words. Surprisingly, room 66 was fairly modern, whitewashed walls, a wide-screen TV, refrigerator, clean en suite bathroom, potted flowers, mirrors. It almost eased our nerves of being the only guests in this rundown motel during the middle of a storm. Of course, there was a door, a locked door that is, at the back of the room, which at the time we assumed was a small cleaning closest. I tried the handle and afterwards forgot all about it as we each took showers, then settled into bed. My girlfriend, who would have been able to take a siesta on the edge of a cliff during a hurricane, fell swiftly to sleep. But for me, it took much longer, tossing and turning until I finally drifted off. I woke around 2 a.m. and that is when the funny business started. It began with a noise on the roof. Now it wasn't the pit-patter of rain upon the flat roof. No, it sounded like footsteps. As if someone was pacing up and down. Okay, I thought. It's a bird. There is a bird on my roof. It's just a bird. Yet the more I told myself that, the more frantic the steps became. Until suddenly they stopped. I lay underneath the sheets, listening. The rain had ceased and the storm moved on, but still the howling wind whipped around the courtyard outside. Relax, I told myself, and got up to go to the toilet, using the dim lights in the parking to guide my way to the en suite bathroom. Now, it was as I was in the middle of my business, that the door to the bathroom, which I had purposely opened to full extent, began slowly creaking closed by itself. My initial reaction upon seeing it in my peripheral vision was that the ground must be uneven. But then my brain began working on overtime to determine if the door had done that earlier. No, it hadn't. We were on perfectly flat ground. So now I'm doing my business in a race against time against this slowly creaking door. And the bathroom, having no natural light, is in near total darkness, and that is when my heart starts beating fast because I have a very strange feeling that there is someone stood in the bathtub, no other than a little girl, watching me. The moment that door closes I know that I am toast, and I would have my throat ripped out by whoever, or whatever, is standing there. In the last moment, I lurched for the door and jammed my fingers between the gap, flicking on the light switch. There was no one in the bathtub. It was just my imagination. I stood there, panting, my body covered in a thin layer of sweat. I put the door back into its position, fully open, and waited for it to move again, disproving my theory of the perfectly even ground. It did not move a millimeter. I moved it into another position. Maybe it was the angle you had to get right for it to move. No, it remained in place. Okay. That's creepy. I turned the lights off and returned to bed, where I lay motionless, staring up at the ceiling while my heart pounded in my ears. That is when I saw a silhouette move past the window outside. It was a faint silhouette, but all the same, something did walk past. I sat up, watching the curtains and the dim lights in the parking lot. It could have been the old lady from the office, maybe checking on something. The old lady who never said anything and accepted my $20. Hey, I said, shaking my girlfriend awake, no time to act brave now. No sir, request dismissed, sir. Hey, Emily, I continued, shaking her harder. Wake up, god damn it. But she just lay asleep, or unconscious. I felt a plunge of fear. And that's when the parking lot light went out, casting the room into total darkness. Wake up, Emily. I wanted to scream but no words came out, and then I heard a key being placed into the lock of that door on the other side of the room, the one that we had assumed was the cleaning closet. And the key slowly began to turn, until the lock clicked, and even though I could not see it due to the darkness, I felt a draft of cold air and knew it had drifted open. Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, I'm thinking, sitting there next to my unconscious girlfriend, shivering with fear. What do you want? I called out feebly. I was answered by the flick of a light switch, revealing that what lay behind that door. It was a corridor. There couldn't be a corridor, though. The motel was a small U-shaped courtyard of single units. There was surely not enough space. Yet, right before my eyes, was a secret passage. I got out of bed. Yes, that's right, in my PJs I got up and started inching towards the corridor. Why? I don't know why, something was drawing me in. It was like my body had a mind of its own, and was taking me towards the corridor. No. I croaked, trying to convince my body to stop. I could only control the neck muscles, however, so I turned to look at my girlfriend in the bed, to try and plead with her to wake up and save me from the imminent disaster that I was soon to befall. But as I turned my neck, I quickly found that she was awake. Watching me with hollow and lifeless eyes like that of the old lady at the desk. "Email?" I stuttered. She rose her finger to lips, shushing me. Then she grinned and blood spilled out of her mouth and ran down her chin. "WWWHTTEF." I never got to finish the sentence because the force that was pulling my body had brought me into the middle of this secret corridor. On either side it ran off into darkness. There were other doors that lined the passage, doors which all had the number 666. Then, out of the darkness, one end of the corridor began to glow red. It grew brighter, and strangely, I could feel a throbbing, like somewhere down there was a beating heart. I turned my head away and as I did, I glanced back into my room, where I saw that my girlfriend was now standing beside the TV, her body slumped, her face hidden by her hair. As if she was possessed. "Emily!" I tried to scream, but yet again, no words came out. The corridor glowed so brightly now I could feel the heat on my skin. The next part was the worst. From behind the doors that lined the corridors came the sound of voices. People I knew. A friend who had passed away long ago started calling my name, beating against the door with his fist. He calling to me to let him out, telling me it was my fault he died. How long I stayed in that corridor for I don't know. It might have been a minute, maybe a day, who knows, maybe I am still trapped there, perhaps in one of those rooms, waiting like my friend for the next victim to be ensnared in the trap. Somehow, however, I don't know how, I found myself back in the car, driving down I-95. I was shaking violently, and my girlfriend lay in the passenger seat unconscious. I pulled right off the highway and made it to the nearest town, where I collapsed at the front door of the nearest house, babbling incoherently about demons and witches and corridors in motels. It's been a week now and my girlfriend is still not awake. That night she was airlifted to Maine Medical Center where it was diagnosed that she was in a coma. I gave my statement to the police about what happened at the motel. They don't believe me. Of course they don't, would you? An officer told me that the lodge closed in the 60s after a father murdered his whole family there one night. But that's my story. Emily's family are here in the hospital and are refusing to speak to me. They think I tried to murder her. I rang my folks and they flew out a few days ago and are with me now. My dad's been sorting out a lawyer because he heard whispers of myself being charged if Emily fails to wake up. I'm sharing this account because I don't know who else to turn to. Maybe I'm mad, but I experienced something dark and disturbing last week in that motel.